and I'm sure they're going to talk about this, but that movie was made in 1993. And when it started, that portion at the beginning talking about how the economy tanked as a result of real estate loans, wasn't that just chilling? It was so scary, like he wrote it yesterday.
Instead of making the movie, should have just shorted America.
But Michael, before you sit down, you have to get the golden thumb. Nate has it here for you. This is a casting of Roger's thumb made by the people who make the Academy Awards. But this is even better.
I didn't know that this is what I came here for, but now it is. Thank you. So this is really beautiful. This is really great. Thank you.
And you're going to be joined on stage by Elvis Mitchell, the former film critic of the New York Times, host of In Treatment, and NPR commentator and interviewer. We're very happy to have Elvis back.
Yes, thank you. I have a bronze thumb. It's the best I can do.
And along with Elvis will be our very own official blogger for Ebertfest. And actually, Lisa is a film critic and a writer, Lisa Rosman. And finally, we're joined by Jim Emerson, who is the editor of RogerEbert.com, formerly of Cinemania, film critic, and lots of credits. Jim Emerson.
Oh, great. Perfect, thank you.
Whoa. Put it in your lap. Wow, that's real looking gold.
Look at how well made they are.
Roger, I'm so sorry. This is not a comment. Please don't take it that way.
The thumb is still up.
And there's a big dent in the stage. Those things are solid.
How do you follow that, ladies and gentlemen? How about with this? All your movies, your fiction is all about people looking for the truth in one way or another.
That's true. I still have to catch my breath because I haven't seen this projected, and the print was basically really great. Little stuff at the.
When's the last time you saw it projected? How long?
What?
Since basically.
Basically since it came out. I've seen it on video a couple of times, but I haven't seen it all the way through nonstop without getting out of my seat nervously, or drunk. So I have to catch my breath. Yeah, I think. Here's what struck me about that, which is that Rachel Rosenthal, who appears at the beginning, Neil Abute also gave this a really good review, and he said something about when he was a film critic, and he said something about it became a watchword in his family about her. He talked about her, and he said anytime there's a problem in his family, he said you need to go to Lone Pine. And so she's a performance artist, and basically what you see in the movie is what she is, and some of the dialogue is hers. All the S&M people at the party were Bob, what's his name? I'm blanking on his last name, but in the movie Sick.
Bob Flanagan.
Bob Flanagan, who was a friend of mine, and he's in it, and a lot of the people at the party are from the LA art and S&M scene. It's an interesting scene, and so I was watching it and I was thinking whether the line. I mean, I was interested to hear where the laughs came, particularly towards the end. But I was watching and thinking, well, it was an interesting choice to get people who are actually that thing instead of actors representing that thing. And I'm not, I would just say that I don't know if I'm going to do it again. I don't know if I would have done something which was essentially documentary within a completely fictional framework, because what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do was wait waited to make fun of them, be satirical. I just wanted them to be themselves. But I have a feeling that in a way becomes sort of confusing. Like either you're fictional or you're documentary, and I'm not sure.
I was actually curious. I never worry about these things usually, or wonder about them. But I was curious if you found the movie funny at the time and now.
I thought the script was really funny. I think at the time I thought it was funny. Now, because the economy is what I mean, it's like I don't think it's so funny. I thought the script was funny.
I just wanted to ask you about it's so densely written. You must really have. I mean, obviously, a good writer is a good observer, and I had lived in LA from like '87 to '94, so that was when I had moved away. And just now, it took me back so vividly. It really is of a time and place, but also, has grown to where it's universal. Obviously, there are relevances to now. But did you study it seems like an outgrowth of the Rapture too, going from religion to this spirituality.
Well, I've always been interested in belief as an expression of character, rather than belief or theology as an abstract. I was a religion. Actually, I started as a religion major at college, and then I found that I couldn't get the teachers to admit that they were actually interested in religion, or that they were religious in any way. They were treating it like Chinese pottery, at least where I went, or at that time. And I then just something after that, I just started thinking about, as a writer, only exploring theology. You can only explore theology as something that somebody believes. You can't explore it in the abstract.
So it can't be just a study. In fact, it has to be a belief system.
It's all psychology. As something set in a particular historical moment or a particular community. The relationship between individual psychology and group psychology and nature and nurture is all the foundation for what you believe and how you challenge what you believe.
But the reason I'm glad you brought up the Rapture, Jim, because that's why I was asking about truths, because in one way or another, even because I reread Under Radar, there's that search for a kind of a bigger truth, be it through retail or some spiritual exercise or S&M. People are looking for ways to find the truth for themselves.
I think that's very American. I think that we're all trying to find that in one way or another. I mean, yoga, just is. It's an exercise. I mean, maybe it comes with a religious tradition, but it's also just an exercise, and people want to. It's a kind of low-grade entrance into spirituality for people who otherwise don't want to think about God or don't want to pray, but they want some kind of spiritual. They're looking for some sort of spirituality, and they also want to get strong. But it's, I don't know. Am I repeating myself? I'm repeating myself.
That's something.
I'm at the edge. I'm sorry. I'm at the edge of, because the movie is sort of shaking me up. So I'm at the edge.
What shook you up about? Because I'm wondering what it was like the first time you saw it versus now. The very first time you saw it. And then now.
It's hard to remember. I think when you're, well,
in a way, okay, all right,
let me answer the question. Is that it's actually always hard to, it's always hard to look at something I've written. Almost impossible in a way, because it's like listening to my voice being played back on a tape recorder. I don't see it the way anybody else sees it. So, the last time you see something, or the first time you see something after it's come back from the lab, you're looking at, oh, shit, fuck, I got extended that cut 3 beats longer, or why didn't I cast somebody else for that, or so it takes a long time to just relax with, to relax with it and enjoy what you can and forgive what you can't.
But it's obviously like The Rapture too, I think, extremely personal film. Yeah. And it's hard for you, obviously, to separate yourself from the scene.
It's much more personal than I remember. It's really much more personal than I remember it, and I was surprised at how much I was exposing, which is good. But there are things in there that are basically letters to me that I'm looking at now, like these messages in a bottle just washed up on the beach.
See, because apropos what you were saying, Jim, I'm wondering in a lot of ways, it must feel like you're looking at old snapshots. You know, hearing that even the old KCRW promo in the car.
That was Ruth Seymour, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a, you know, Elvis just mentioned Under Radar, which is my third novel, and when I pick up one of my books and I read it, because there's something about writing a novel, the concentration that it takes and the time it takes. Once you put it down for a while, and I know other novelists just feel the same way. You pick it up and you say, how was I ever that good? In an you know, sort of unembarrassed way. You know, 4 novels, which is, you know, I want to get 5, but at least, you know, want to do more. But each time I pick up one of my books, I'm happier than not. I think, well, this is good. I don't want to be obsessive about it and read it, and I don't want to try to, you know, I don't want to think about how to imitate myself to reach a particular style again. It's just interesting to go back. And it's much harder with my movies, whether the ones I've written or that somebody else has directed.
Why is that hard for the movies? Because one of the things about the books is that there's that sense of the characters looking for self-awareness, very much so in the books. And in the movies, it's more like they're just trying to figure out who they are. You know, it's like, I know it's a kind of a fine line.
All right, well, part of, and you know, so this is interesting about this festival, which is that most of the movies you're looking at didn't make money. So, you know, other than Apocalypse Now, I mean, you're not even looking at Apocalypse, you're looking at what they wanted Apocalypse Now to be, which is an interesting way of looking at the film. But otherwise, these are not, you know, these are movies that may have gotten golden thumbs and critical success, but they didn't tear up the box office. So in looking at this, you know, I'm also looking at and listening to the laughs, I'm also studying this and thinking, you know, well, if this was out of town and a tryout of a play, what would I do differently? You know, I'd add musical numbers. I'd keep the nudity. I don't know. I mean, I'd work on the rhythms to get more laughs all the way through where I thought there were laughs in the script, and try to examine those moments where I could improve the laughs.
It's funny you say all this, because to me, I remember seeing it when it first came out, and
where were you when you saw it?
I saw it in the theater, actually.
I mean, in Los Angeles or New York?
Oh, no, I was a kid, man. I was in Boston, and
all kids go to Boston. I love that book.
No, I'm just saying, I hadn't gotten to New York or LA or somewhere fancy, and I was still in school, and I found it incredibly painful. So as we were walking in here today, I was like, I wonder if I'm going to find it as painful, and how am I going to sit on a stage if I found it that painful again? And I did. And it's interesting to be encountering what I think is your own response to it, because I think what this movie's really about is people who are self-aware without the courage or I don't know, or are too lazy to do anything about what they know about themselves. You know, I mean, there's that, I think the climactic moment for me in this film is when she's like, I can't feel anything. You know, and then even death isn't really a solution for either of them, because again, really, I think they're too fearful even
well,
to
but it's that line in the movie where somebody says, it takes courage to live and it takes courage to die,
yeah.
Which is kind of a key summation point.
Right. So, frankly, this movie is great. I mean, exactly what makes it great is why I would never make money, because, right, because it's because basically it's the worst part of all of us. You know, it's the worst part. It's that moment when you look in the mirror and you have so many mirrors and windows in this movie. Just jump. Just do it, man. Have some courage. I just want to say it all out loud.
No, it's interesting to hear this. I think that, you know, there's, William Carlos Williams said that the poem is the capsule, is where we wrap up our punishable secrets, and you know, that it's a seed that it'll come true in a better time. I wish I could remember the exact quote, but I at the time I felt, because I had read that, I mean, that was in my head when I was writing this, and I was thinking, so is there a way to pack something so tightly that it will unpack later on, which is something I definitely think about when I'm working on my books, and I really thought about working on this. And it's what I try, you know, and I try to do it in all my scripts, which is why I've got a lot of scripts sitting on the shelf.
Well, do you see it as a progression or variations on a theme from the Rapture to New Age, and then a book, one of your novels, Among the Dead, still haunts me, and I can almost see how they flow together. Do you think of them that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, writers have their obsessions, and Faulkner said that, you know, all you need to write about is the little postage stamp of the world that you stand on. You know, you don't have to be jealous of Faulkner because he had Mississippi and all of the history and the lore and the depth of the South behind him. You know, if you live in a particular part of town and you're watching a particular, I mean, part of the way this movie got, actually the genesis for this movie was that there was it took about 7 or 8 years, but there was a guy I saw selling clothing at a department store, and I just thought he had an interesting face. Then a few years later, he was selling clothing, he was a floor manager at Fred Siegel, which is a store in West Hollywood, and a very successful, hip, very successful small kind of department store, and he was the floor manager, and I don't think I'd ever said a single, I don't think I ever spoke to him then, because I wasn't buying his suits, but I recognized him. And then he opened up a clothing store on Melrose Avenue, which is a fashionable street in LA, and was actually just beginning to become fashionable when he opened up. And, well, it was on the north side of the street, too close to La Brea, which is like where the wrong side of the.
That little sort of strip mall-y sort of thing.
No, but the store's not there, and it had kind of Moorish windows, and he had a solid door, and you really couldn't see into the store through the windows. And I just couldn't understand what he was thinking. And the other part of this is that I noticed, because I would walk up and down Melrose all the time, you know, as a writer trying to do something other than write, and it was, you know, you could see there's 10% off, fine. Stores have their seasonal sales. 15, 20%, 30, once you see 30% everything in the store, it's usually doomed, and then 75%, obviously, it's going out. So I watched his store fail, and that was actually the genesis. I mean, other things were happening in the culture, plus I expected that, I thought the economy was going to die, and I'm always right on that one. But I was watching that, so. And that was where the film, and I think what I was watching was trying to understand. I was really interested in what he thought he was doing in making such an obvious mistake for someone who had worked up until then, had worked in places that were all, that were really successful.
But those places were appointment places to go, and there's something that this movie touches on that also comes in and out of fashion, which is the arrogance of really upscale retail. You see that in a lot. As the movie is playing out, I was thinking about a store in Paris called Colette, which is kind of a department store that specializes in limited edition pieces by major designers. And there's a kind of arrogance in that store that you combine that and French retail. They might as well, they spit on you when you walk into the store as a greeting.
Well, okay, but it's also very specifically, it is about retail. And it is about retail in America. And it is about shopping. And it is also about, you could think about them, you could also say it's about two failed artists. They have an artistic vision, they have a vision for something, and they're wrong,
But retail is a gallery rather than, it's not an attempt to make the store welcoming. What I loved is most people came in and they didn't want to buy it, and he said, get out. and she runs
Right.
into the alley having a
Right.
panic attack. He comes back and said, "We made a sale."
This will not work. He is insane. This will not work. Right.
But I was going to ask you about, you brought up William Carlos Williams. I was thinking D.H. Lawrence and that sort of separation between the mind and the body and people not being able to reconcile those two parts of themselves, which is also really important to your work too as a writer.
That one's more unconscious, I think. Really? Yeah, I don't think it's as conscious as this other thing, which is, well, The Return of the Player, which is my second novel about Griffin Mill, which I published about 4 years ago, is also about economic failure. It's about a studio, the Tim Robbins character from the movie is 52 and realizes he's stuck in his career and it's not going to go anywhere, and he views himself as a failure, and then comes up with something that makes him phenomenally wealthy at the end. But it's also about business. But we're all in business. I mean, everybody's in business in one for themselves in this country. We all have to find a way to make a living.
A lot of the people that you deal with are conduits rather than being artists themselves, but they think of themselves as artists, sort of entrepreneur artists rather than being what we think of as being a real artist.
Yeah, I don't know if I could ever feel, I don't think I could write about an artist.
Why not?
Directly. Why not? I almost never believe it when I read it in a book. It's like watching a movie where they've got, reading a book about a fake movie star. You know, movie stars are so singular that an invented movie star for a book always feels really false to me.
Well, another thing that interests me about not just this movie, but The Rapture and the Player too, is that you always have the courage, again that word, to put at the center of your movies really unlikable people, and it's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you finish the question.
No, I do it.
I like them.
I mean, I really don't, but I always like the movie.
I like them. I mean, this time I actually thought, well, I can see why people don't like them. But people I should say, I get really tired writing characters who are obviously heroic and follow the paradigm that, the journey of the hero.
No, but these are nasty, empty people, and it's. And, no, but I mean, and now I'm really walking into bad hot water because you do like them.
No, it's fine.
But what I think is interesting is that it's irrelevant whether or not you like them, in the sense that you have the courage to put out a particular kind of person that we all know exists and exists in each one of us to some degree. And
aren't those almost always the most interesting characters in fiction anyway? I mean, those people who, I mean, the thing about your work too is that when you think your protagonists are the worst people, there's somebody who comes in and completely trumps them. Here being Samuel Jackson with that great speech.
Yeah, that was a great casting moment. It was an early role for him too, yeah.
Well, and then Adam West.
Yeah, well, because I wanted Batman to be RoboCop's father. And it worked. That scene between them is that's true. The scene when he goes ask for the money is actually, I think, of all the things I've written, it's one of my 2 or 3 favorite things I've written, because it's just, it's really economical, and it's just completely, he's just totally humiliated, and $1 million, that he really means that.
Apropos what you were saying too, Lisa, I mean, what's fascinating is that all the stuff you've done is about shifting loyalties. Nobody's loyal to anybody else. I mean, that's to me where the real kind of interesting stuff comes. Not that they're all just really kind of weak, desperate, grasping people often, but that they can't be loyal to anybody.
I feel like because they don't have core, right? I mean, that's what they're looking for, and that's what they don't have the courage to create.
It's interesting. The challenge you're setting me right now is to think about what I would believe in as a, well, in Under Radar, I think was really the only thing I've written where there's complete redemption for the character.
Well, he's reaching for you. Think he?
Well, okay, so this is, I mean, in Under Radar, without getting into too much, but let's sort of go through. The Player was about guilt. Among the Dead, my second novel, is about grief. And The Return of the Player is about greed. But Under Radar is it's a little harder to put into one word, and it's about the question I was asking and that the book answers is, after assuming that you've done some tremendous damage in the world, or say we've all done damage in the world, so after you have paid off as much of the debt as you can for the damage you've done to the world, what's left that can't be repaired, and what do you then have to do? What's still your obligation? What are you still obliged to do to make sure that what is undamaged can't be, what is still damaged can't be made worse? So in the case of that book, somebody murders somebody, a father murders someone and then goes to jail, loses his family, and then years later he returns to the family, but they don't know it's him. They don't know it's him. And he knows he can never tell his children or his ex-wife, who's now remarried, he can never tell them who he is, even though he's brought into the family as a kind of spiritual friend. If he tells them who he is, he's destroyed them.
Actually, he's brought into the family as kind of a surrogate father.
As a surrogate father, right. He's brought into the family as a surrogate father, but he can't ever tell them who he is. And that, well, that's also the difference. And in some ways I look at this and I think, am I really more of a novelist than a filmmaker just generally? And you know, is this really more of a, if this had been written as a novel, could I have explored some of the issues in a deeper way? And
well, what makes a novel for you versus a screenplay in the apps? I mean, when you sit down and write, for example, this, did it ever occur to you that this might be a piece of print fiction rather than a screenplay?
No, because this is based, I think novels, I think movies are often, the best movies are sort of something that you can encapsulate even as a kind of a joke in a way. I mean as a ha-ha joke, but as a you know, as a punchline in some way. And you know, I thought, you know, arrogant couple who are good at shopping have to open a store. That fails. And that's easy, that's the 25 words or less. And a novel is something that when I've written them, I see a much broader, a much bigger canvas and a lot more scenes than a movie can handle, and also something which is really all my novels are written with the novelist right on the shoulder of the character, so that there's no perception in any of my books that's independent of well, no perception, no description of the world is ever independent of somebody's perception. I never have omniscience.
Well, you could not have had that great argument across the gulf of the swimming pool. Right. I mean, that's such a cinematic conceit.
No, I think there's some really, I mean, there are a few moments in this, I think, which are really cinematic, which I'm really proud of. Mostly, I think when I look at it, I think, oh God, some of the editorial rhythm, some of the things the music knocked me out. I thought, God, this is a really great score. Mark Mothersbaugh did a great job, and then the source music was great. I'll tell him. But I looked at this and actually I was just thinking about rhythms when I was watching this and trying to see if there's a way that I can think about rhythm as I'm writing.
Because I find myself thinking, too, that the title is kind of a shell game as well, because when you hear the New Age, you're expecting something New Agey rather than commentary on that. And also, still, you don't really satirize that hunger for a kind of truth in it. You really don't.
Because I don't want to make fun of belief. It's too easy. It's too easy to be satirical about belief. But I also know in watching the film that I don't give the audience much of a clue as to my position on those people who stand, for spiritual leadership, or in the film. I mean, there's all these circles. Sam Jackson has his circle. There's the circle around the fire. There's rings in the store.
No, it's funny because the idea of spirituality and capitalism, it's always a queasy marriage, and I feel like that's a lot of what you're kind of looking at. Like even the death that's orchestrated, I guess, around the center, the middle of the movie, it feels like a boutique death somehow,
Right. Well, there's, again, there's sort of these invented these rituals which are invented because somebody thinks, well, we'll take these bowls and we'll do this. It's not.
It's that hodgepodge of Western and Eastern.
And you're standing on other people's traditions, essentially.
Right, but then if I make fun of it, it makes it too easy a target, because if I see people making fun of spirituality in movies and it's satirical, I tend to be annoyed because it feels shallow, and particularly in these sort of vaguer religions, it's more interesting to try to take them at their own and then indict them from within, rather than indict them from without.
I know you guys must have questions, and if you can please raise your hand so the microphone can come to you and nobody gets hurt in the process of all this. But we were talking about that. I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, about that, because I mean, there feels like there's, in some way, a price tag hanging off everything, and either spiritually or literally, or figuratively or literally, it's about what the cost of something to you.
Yes, the cost, the price you pay. The price you pay, which I think is probably one of my... They didn't like your question.
No, I'm trying to see if there...
Balcony?
No, does anybody have questions for us?
Yes.
Hi.
Where are you? Wave your hand. Okay. Hi.
The Rapture opens in a scene in a telemarketing organization as well, and this one concludes in it. And I was wondering, what is it that you like about telemarketing? Is, I don't know, a crucible of our culture, or I'm not sure how you look at it. Have you worked in that field?
Yeah, I worked in, at a very low moment for a couple of, I think for about a month, I worked in one of those telemarketing offices 2 blocks down from where we shot this. It was kind of horrifying. And that training session, including the line about when was the last time we took a vacation, that was verbatim. That was, I heard that. Yeah, and this guy said, when was this, you know, I'm talking about Acapulco and sex with the sound of the ocean outside. So, or room service, something like that. But that line, that notion had been, that touch of humiliation had been thrown to everybody in the training session.
Stage right. Stage right.
Okay.
Over here.
Okay. Yeah.
Stage right in the house.
Oh.
Check.
Yes. Hi.
Two very succinct questions. 2 succinct questions. I hope you don't mind. 2 of them. In the scene of the first party, Peter's dad comes and says, "Do you want the whole world to know that you only know one song?" while he's playing the piano. The melody is Beret, and I want to know if you chose that, and if so, why?
That's the only song that Peter could play.
Yeah, but you chose Beret.
No, Peter. Well, I mean, what? That's,
Oh, in reality.
Peter Weller.
Peter
That
Wells.
was Peter Weller playing it, and he said, "That's, you know, basically, I wanted a piece of music," and he said, "I can play this." He's a brilliant horn player, but I don't think he's much of a. He was a music major in Texas, so he's really a musician, but he can't play the piano, and that was what he did. So I said, "Fine, that's it."
That's really satisfying. Thanks.
All right.
The second question may take a while for you to answer, and I hope you do. You just said about the player. The question I was asking that the book answers is, and then you went on with that, and that just hit me like a ton of bricks. The question this guy was asking that his book answers is, did the book answer your question in those terms, in that kind of semantics?
The under radar, is that what we're talking about, under radar or the return of the player?
I'm not sure. It might have been the player. I just remember that phrase. I wrote it down.
Yeah, the book answers the question. I mean, I think that, you know, you...
How does the book answer the question and not you, is what I'm asking.
Oh, the process of writing the book, achieving the answer. It's both.
Center. Hi, I'm just very curious. Since you wrote and directed the film, when you watched it just now, did you look at it from more of a writer's perspective or a director's perspective?
The writer was really angry with the director. And the director told the writer to leave the set. You know, so it's both. It's actually both. I mean, you know, I'm at the edge of coherence when I mean, I feel like in most of my work, I'm at the edge of my own coherence. Yeah.
How do you mean?
Balcony?
Well, I think that the best work comes from the limits of the artist's ability to understand the idea, so that working in a kind of feverish faith, more comes out than the artist can control.
Yeah.
Up here.
Okay.
Two things. One, the portable phones that you use, was that a directorial decision? And how did you come to work with Mark Mothersbaugh?
The portable phones? You mean what? The cord?
With the antenna.
Those are cordless phones.
That was state of the art in those days. That was small. Mothersbaugh, he had, was a huge Devo fan, but actually I think I read an interview in which he had worked with Fellini on a project that hadn't been made, but he'd done something with Fellini, and I thought that would be interesting, and so I spent time with him and was really happy working with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello. I had a question about the Adam West character being the father. Him and the son's name was Peter. I'm sorry. They had a lot of similarities. They both seemed to be kind of womanizers, people who want to own lots of possessions. I was wondering, when you were writing Adam West's character, did you see a lot of reflections in the Peter's character? And if so, was that something that maybe was personal in your life with possibly, I don't know if this is too personal, but connection maybe with your father?
I told you that did.
I'm sorry.
No, that's very good.
So tell me what your dad did for a living.
Well, no, 1 second, let me answer the question. Yeah, it's about a guy who was really raised badly by his father. And it's a horror. I mean, I think the roots of his emptiness are clearly in his father's cold, cruel, never says a single supporting thing to him. I mean, I don't know how many college papers can be written off of this movie, but discuss Peter's relationship with his father in 5 tight pages. I think you could do that. My relationship with my father was a comedy writer, had a noble career starting in the early days of TV, and passed away a couple of years ago. And I got along pretty well with him. But again, nobody taught you to be a man. Lines like that. I mean, that's.
And that's a great. Talk about a cinematic moment too. I mean, when Patrick is talking to him and the lights go dead and people just disappear and he's suddenly floating by himself and he's completely not grounded.
Okay, so I think the idea of what an adult man is or what a man is supposed to be in this society, there's clearly everybody's. What are they? There's not a lot. I think that's a big issue for the return of the player. Is also sort of how do you define yourself as a man, and even. Well, I think it's actually it's in Under Radar too. I think there's something in my good work in which that's an issue.
There's also something in your work too about the influence of media on people and measuring themselves against those models that they see and hear.
Yeah, but that's a trend in I think that actually there was a Mario Vargas Llosa book about Flaubert that had a big influence on how I think about character. Just because he really underlined that Bovary is completely Bovary is the first character in modern literature who's totally a victim of popular culture and trying to live her life like a soap opera, or the soap operas of the day, the romantic novels of the day.
Well, I'm just asking that too because as we were talking outside, you talked about how so many lapsed Catholics come up to you and applaud what you've done in your work.
All right, so what I was saying was, without naming names, but I was saying that one of the things I discovered with the Rapture was that lapsed Catholics who are in recovery in 12-step programs tended to like my Jewish gloss on Protestantism, evangelical eschatology, better than anybody else, and it took a while to discover that.
Question?
Down right.
Okay.
Right here.
Just a question about Judy Davis, who is one of my very favorite actresses in the entire world, and what was it like to work with her, and anything you can tell me about her? See
this gray hair? No. No, she's brilliant, she's an amazing, actually, I'll tell you, I liked her performance better today than I've ever liked it before. I think I think there was a certain amount of struggle between us, the way there is on a set, and yet when I watched it, I thought, God, her choices were just great, and she's really letting me into the character, and I was really pleased by how much she was holding it together.
I just had a question about the ending. I wish I could remember now exactly what Roger said in his piece about. He had a question about the ending, but was that the ending that you had always envisioned?
Yeah, I think we shot an ending. I know we did shoot an ending, which I thought was just atrocious. The studios, they get together at she's in the eyeglass store, and then he comes in, and it looks like he's changed, and they walk down the street, and you're going to go this far for $7 million, you might as well just go all the way. Whatever the movie cost. I mean, it's like, it's not like Iron Man losing and the studio saying he can't do that. But he rusts. They're not going to. Maybe Iron Man 10, they'll let him rust.
Is the microphone around somewhere else?
Balcony.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you, first of all, for creating this piece and writing it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I have a question for you as a writer, and how have you been influenced? Are there authors, playwrights, philosophers that have particularly influenced you in your writing? Thank you.
At different times, different people. The player was, I think, a product of 3 writers. It was Patricia Highsmith became my mommy. James M. Cain became my daddy, and Theodore Adorno became my uncle. And I read all of Highsmith, I read all of Cain, and I read as much of Adorno as I could absorb. And there was an Adorno book that he wrote with Max Horkheimer called The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception. The title abridges the entire 300 pages of the book, but you can also read the book. And I put those 3 writers together and became a novelist.
Well yes, I guess we'll wait.
Center, slightly left.
Okay.
Hi. First of all, I didn't think any of the characters had any core at all. And I thought that was an indictment. I'm over here. Hello.
I got you. Okay. See.
Okay. But it also appealed to me because everybody was selling something and everybody wanted to buy what they were selling, and it was a matter of who did the best job. Now, Samuel Jackson obviously was doing a good job. I didn't like him. I didn't like what he was doing. Those New Age folks, they were brilliant, and they knew their customers. And if you know your customers, you can sell. And that's what resonated with me.
Yeah, that's the intention, which is that the people who are there for, for Patrick Beauchot, the Frenchman, or are there for Rachel Rosenthal in those scenes, in those circles, they're already there. They're looking for that thing. And when the spiritual guy says, next time choose a better location, he was on the street, I mean, he buys his way out of he buys his way out of responsibility by saying, well, even if you fail, the experience is going to be good for you. But, and that that's a certain sort of, that's the trap door. But I didn't, it wasn't what the movie was about. That was a background for the film rather than the theme itself.
But really, it was that the mirrors were too small, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. You touched very lightly on the cinematic moments, and the scene at the end of the party where Peter was alone that Elvis just mentioned blew me away. But I wonder if you could talk a little about the look of it, how it was shot and lit, and the use of red, the red accent. I thought it was a gorgeous looking movie.
The production designer was Robin Standifer, who worked, she did Rapture and then The New Age, and then she did Practical Magic, and then did a couple of Ben Stiller movies, and off of Ben Stiller movies she became his designer and architect, and then her husband was an architect, and she's a designer, and then she got out of the business because she wanted things to be permanent. She was tired of doing beautiful work that was only on film. So the color, she was instrumental in the color choice. And then John Campbell, the DP, had done, I think, 1 or 2 Gus Van Sant movies. He'd worked with a partner. And, you know, you don't have many days and much time to shoot it, and you light it as well as you can. And I remember once he came to me in one of the bedroom scenes, and he said, "Where's the light?" Because he was a literalist. And I said, "It's a movie. I don't know. The light comes from movie nowhere." So, you know, so the way the light often does in, you know, it's like in total isolated darkness, you know, there's always a light in the movies because there has to be. So otherwise it's a radio play.
What I was going to say is the thing we haven't brought up here is that Oliver Stone's one of the executive producers on the film. And wonder what your relationship was like with him and how that all happened.
He had an overall deal with Warner Brothers to put a couple of movies, you know, basically greenlight a couple of movies at a certain budget level, and he liked the script and greenlit this. And he was responsible for a couple of other movies, but then he gave up being a producer. He didn't want to do it anymore. I don't think it wasn't satisfying for him, and he wasn't that hands-on. You know, I had a couple of meetings with him. He came to the set a couple of times, but he wasn't. He basically left us alone to make the movie.
Because also, too, was the thing we were talking about earlier, is that this, what to remember, this is a movie made at a movie studio. Yeah.
Well, it was made by yes, it was made at Warner Brothers, but I had almost no contact with Warner's because the New Regency, I think, you know, they financed it. Warner Brothers distributed it, and so I had I had very little interference from anybody making the film.
Yeah. Hey, Omar.
Thank you. This is similar, and I really appreciate your film very much, Michael. This is similar to a question that was asked a few moments ago. You talked about disembodiment, and there is another scene when Peter Weller's character is in I guess a blue chair or something like that, and he kind of is collapsed and just got nothing but that bright red patterned tie on and the black shirt. I thought that was a really striking moment. Apart from the wardrobe people that were on your film, how much input did you personally have with the ties that Peter Weller's character wears?
But you know, the great thing about, well, no, the great thing about being a director is that everything gets shown to you. You have to choose everything. You just choose everything. You may regret it later on, but it's ultimately your choice. You know, the actors tend to want to choose the jewelry. There's a table usually laid out, and there's half a dozen watches and rings, and that tends to be something because they need the prop. So you tend to, you know, unless it's like the Patek Philippe on the truck driver isn't right. But unless Patek Philippe is handing the watches for, you know, consideration, in which case, by golly. But no, I think actors like to choose their own jewelry more. But when it comes to clothing and colors, you know, you work it out with the actor too as to what's right. And then I with Rob in particular, because she's really brilliant. Robin and the costume designer and you know, you sit. It's all committee. You talk about what your palette is going to be, and then you talk about developing a palette all the way through the film. So that if you're going to have color changes to the film, you want to saturate it in one direction or desaturate it, however you want to do it, you know, whatever it is, you try to get all of that programmed as you're starting the film so that the choices, you've got swatches for each act of the film. That's how I like to work.
Well, let's thank, first of all, Jim and Lisa and the latest Golden Thumb recipient, Michael Tolkien.
What? No. I want that. Thank you.